the fire was out. The warmth, the last remnant of comfort in the old cabin, was gone. Alex, Jessie, and Tyler huddled together, their breath misting in the cold, each of them silently dreading what they knew was coming. The whispers had filled the cabin now, no longer a distant, eerie murmur but loud, insistent, as if the very walls had a voice, commanding them to stay. The wind outside battered against the windows, but it wasn't just the storm anymore. There was something else. Something they had felt, something that had stalked them from the moment they stepped foot into this place. Jessie was the first to speak, her voice shaking. "We need to leave. We can't stay in here, it's worse inside now." Her eyes flicked toward the door, still locked tight as though the storm had trapped them within. Tyler, gripping the fireplace poker as though it were his last lifeline, nodded. "We need to make a run for it. There's no choice anymore. This place, it's alive." Alex, always the calmest of the three, stood frozen. His eyes were wide, staring at the shadows in the far corner of the room. "I think it's too late for that," he whispered. They all turned to look, and there it was, the same figure they'd seen upstairs. But this time, it wasn't just standing in the corner, shrouded in shadow. It was moving, slowly, deliberately, toward them. Its form was more defined now, a tall, distorted shape with long arms that reached out as though to welcome them into its grasp. Its face was still hidden, but its presence was suffocating. Jessie screamed, stumbling backward into the wall, her hands covering her face. Tyler took a step forward, gripping the poker tighter, but his arms were shaking. Alex didn't move. He couldn't. The whispers intensified, filling the room, overwhelming their senses. "Stay with us, forever." The voice seemed to come from every direction. It was in their heads, in their bones, chilling them to the core. The figure stepped closer, its dark form now just a few feet away. Alex finally broke the paralysis, grabbing Jessie's arm. "Run! Now!" Tyler moved first, bolting for the door, his movements desperate, driven by sheer terror. Alex dragged Jessie behind him, his heart pounding in his chest. The door didn't budge at first, as if the cabin itself was resisting their escape, but then, with a loud crack, it flew open, the cold night air blasting them in the face. The snowstorm outside was a blinding wall of white. The wind howled, tearing at their clothes, as they plunged out into the darkness. Behind them, the door slammed shut again, as though the cabin was angry to let them go. But they didn't look back. They ran. The snow was thick, up to their knees, slowing their movements as they struggled through it. The forest loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, the trees like tall, skeletal figures swaying in the wind. The cold bit into their skin, but it was the sense of something following them, chasing them, that drove them forward. Jessie stumbled, falling into the snow with a cry. Alex pulled her up, his breath ragged. "Come on, we can't stop." Tyler was ahead of them, moving faster, driven by sheer panic. "There's got to be a road out of here," he shouted over the wind. "If we can find the road, we can get back to the car." But the car felt like a distant memory now, like something from another world. The storm had erased any sense of direction, and the only thing that seemed real was the dark presence still behind them, always just out of sight, but there. They reached the edge of the forest, the trees towering over them, offering a brief shelter from the storm. The wind howled through the branches, but at least it wasn't whipping snow into their faces anymore. Tyler stopped to catch his breath, his face pale, eyes wide. "We've got to keep moving." Alex nodded, his hands shaking, not from the cold but from the fear that gripped him. Yeah, but where? We don't know where the road is. We don't even know if we're going in the right direction. Jessie's voice was barely audible, but the fear in it was unmistakable. I don't care where we go. As long as it's away from that thing. They began moving through the trees, their pace slower now, more cautious. The shadows in the forest were thick, and every sound, the snap of a branch, the rustle of the wind, felt like it could be something far worse. They had no idea where they were going, but stopping wasn't an option. The whispers, though faint now, were still there, carried on the wind, following them into the woods. Every now and then, Alex would glance behind them, half expecting to see the figure from the cabin standing among the trees, but there was nothing. Not yet. They trudged deeper into the forest, their breath coming in gasps, their legs aching from the effort. Time had lost all meaning. Minutes, hours, it was all a blur of cold and fear. The storm continued to rage around them, and the world seemed to shrink to just the three of them and the darkness ahead. But then, through the trees, they saw it, a light. A faint, flickering light in the distance. Tyler pointed, his voice hoarse from the cold. Look! Over there! Alex squinted, his heart leaping in his chest. It's a house, or a cabin. Something. Jessie, her face pale and streaked with snow, looked hesitant. What if it's the same as the other one? Alex shook his head, desperation in his voice. It's our only option. We can't stay out here. We'll freeze to death. Without waiting for an answer, they started moving toward the light, pushing through the snow and the trees with renewed energy. As they got closer, the light became clearer, a warm, golden glow coming from the windows of a small cabin, nestled in the woods. Tyler reached the door first, pounding on it with his fist. Hello? Is anyone there? There was no answer. The only sound was the wind howling through the trees. Jessie looked at Alex, her eyes filled with fear. What if no one's home? Alex hesitated for only a moment before he reached for the doorknob. It turned easily, and the door swung open with a creak. Inside, the cabin was warm. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting long shadows on the walls. The furniture was simple, rustic, and there was no sign of anyone living there. It's empty, Tyler said, stepping inside cautiously, his eyes scanning the room. But someone was just here. Jessie stepped in next, her teeth chattering from the cold. We need to warm up, at least for a little while. Alex shut the door behind them, his hand lingering on the knob for a moment longer than necessary. Something didn't feel right. The warmth of the fire, the coziness of the room, it felt wrong. Too inviting. Too easy. But they had no other choice. They gathered near the fire, their bodies slowly thawing from the cold. Jessie wrapped herself in a blanket she found draped over a chair, her eyes constantly flicking toward the window. Do you think it's still following us? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tyler shook his head, though he didn't sound convinced. No, we're safe now. We're far from that place. But Alex wasn't so sure. He stood near the window, peering out into the darkness. The storm had died down slightly, but the wind still howled through the trees. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut again. All three of them jumped, their eyes wide with fear. What the hell? Tyler whispered, his grip tightening on the poker again. Alex moved to the door, his heart pounding. He pulled it open, stepping out into the cold once more, but there was nothing. Just the snow, the wind, and the endless darkness of the forest. But as he turned to go back inside, something caught his eye, a figure standing at the edge of the trees. Dark and distorted, just like before. It was watching them. "Alex?" Jessie's voice was small, terrified. "What do you see?" Alex didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the figure, knowing in his heart that no matter how far they ran, they would never escape. The whispers began again, soft at first, then louder, more insistent, as the figure stepped closer, its shadow stretching across the snow toward the cabin. The last thing Alex heard before the door slammed shut behind him was a single, chilling word. "Stay." And so, the night carried on, the storm swirling outside, and the three friends realized, in the end, there was no escaping the winter's whisper.